Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we are continuing our look at Saviours of Kamigawa, and we're going to look at Spirit Flames, which is a red and green deck here. Let's look at the deck list. So we've got 25 creatures, 11 instants, 24 land, really nice and simple, and a mana curve off to the side there. So let's start looking at these creatures. So, you know what? I'm actually really happy with this deck because it is just red-green, like kind of aggro, which is just nice and simple and straightforward. It's not trying to play around with any kind of convoluted themes. It doesn't, suffer from like third set syndrome too much. So this is actually pretty straightforward and quite happy looking at this deck. So the two rares of the deck, I actually really like these two. So Arashi the Sky Asunder, who's a 5 mana, 5/5, and has X 1 green, tap, does X damage to target creature with flying, and you can channel it, which is really actually one of the minor themes in this deck. But channel means just if it's in your hand, you can pay its channel cost, and it's then kind of like playing a like a sorcery essentially. But yeah, channel it for X and 2 green to do X damage to every creature with flying, which is pretty fun. Yeah, I think Arashi is perfectly fine. Like just being a 5/5 for 5 is honestly with no drawbacks is honestly like noteworthy enough in Kamigawa. Honestly, kind of annoys me he doesn't have like reach, because it really feels like him not being able to block flyers it doesn't make sense to me. And then on the opposite end of that is we have Jawari, the Earth of Flame, who's the other rare. 5 mana for a 3/3. X and red. Tap does X damage to target creature without flying, and channel it for X and triple red. Discard it and does X damage to every creature without flying. So obviously these two are kind of like homaging like Hurricane and Earthquake, which are the classic green and red sweep spells. Yeah, I like both these. So I kind of wish Jawari was like maybe like a 4/4 or something. But yeah, I think both these are like perfectly fine, really good, simple, strong, straightforward effects. Yeah, I've got no problem with either of them. Perfectly good rares, I think. We have a single Bryanite Kami, so 5 mana for a 3/3. Whenever you play a Spirit Arcane spell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. I think every card in this deck is Spirit Arcane, so yep, that's perfect. Pretty much handing out +1/+1 counters is really good. 2 Elder Pine of Jukai, so 3 mana for a 2/1. Whenever you play a Spirit Arcane spell, reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put all lands revealed this way into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. That's not terrible. And Soul Shift 2, which means when it dies, you can get a spirit from your graveyard with mana value 2 or less back into your hand. So it's kind of like very limited raised dead effect. Yeah, I think Elder Pine of Jukai is basically perfectly okay. Yeah, the fact that you could potentially get maybe like 2 or even 3 lands into your hand from just as an extra benefit to whatever spell you're casting is actually pretty good. Not so great when you reveal like your top 3 cards and they're all really good and then you have to put them on the bottom. But yeah, it's okay. I mean, it is what it is. 2 Berg Rafters, 4 mana for a 2/2. Sacrifice to give a creature +2/+2 land turn. It has Soul Shift 3. So, I mean, if you do ever need that Soul Shift ability, at least it can sacrifice itself. +2/+2 is an okay, buff to give. Yeah, Berg Rafters basically okay, in my mind. Fort Branch Garami. This is actually pretty good. I really wish there'd been more cards like this. So 5 mana for a 4/4, which is like decent size, and it has double Soul Shift. It has Soul Shift 4 twice, which means when it dies, you get to get 2 spirits with each with mana value 4 or less back into your hand. So it does like a double raised dead effect. So really wish there'd been. I kind of wish there'd been like a maybe like a rare version of this that had like like 3 instances of Soul Shift or something. I think that would have been really interesting. But yeah, it's a perfectly good card. Like being a 4/4 for 5 with no drawbacks again is sadly makes him a pretty good card in Kamigawa block. 2 Kami of the Tended Garden, 4 mana for 4/4, which is okay, but you have to pay a green every turn to keep him alive. And when he dies, he's got Soul Shift 3 as well. So look, quite a lot of Soul Shift honestly in this deck. And then this is actually the only non-spirit in the deck. Promised Kanushi, who is 1 green mana for a 1/1, but has Soul Shift 7. which is actually pretty good. And again, I really wish this was a theme that had been maybe been in green in Kamigawa, like to have like the green monks and druids and stuff who are kind of like meant to be more in tune with the kami. If they'd had more interactions, like if they'd been this kind of like, I know, human spirit kind of synergies, I don't know, that would have been interesting. But unfortunately, we didn't get that. But yeah, just being Soul Shift 7 means that you can get pretty much anything in this deck back into your hand after it dies. And it will die because it's a 1-1 for 1. So yeah, Promise Kanushi actually pretty good in this deck. Bunch of cheap spirits, or cheaper spirits. Hanakami is great, 1 green mana for a 1-1. Sacrifice to get an arcane card from your graveyard back into your hand, so you get a double casting of another spell. 2 Petal Main Baku, this is good. This helps you get out your more expensive spirits quicker. 2 mana for 1-2. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, gets a key counter, and you can pay 1, remove all the key counters from it to get mana of any one color to your mana pool. Obviously, it's not worth doing it when you have 1 counter, because then you're paying 1 to remove a counter to get 1 mana, so you obviously need to wait until it's got at least 2 on it, I suppose. Venerable Kumo, this is unfortunately a little overcost, I think, so 5 mana for a 2-3 with reach, but it has Soul Shift as well, I suppose, so, you know, there's actually a fair amount of recursion in this deck, but unfortunately it's really only the green spirits that have recursion, like the red spirits don't really have Soul Shift at all. A single Frostling, 1 red mana for a 1-1, sacrifice it so it does 1 damage to a creature. Yeah, fine, it kills, you know, small utility creatures, I suppose, so it's okay. Glitterfang, I actually quite like Glitterfang. And I actually really wish there'd been more than 1 in this deck. Like, I would have liked to have seen at least 3, honestly. So 1 red mana for a 1-1 haste, so basically Raging Goblin, and at end of turn, you return it back to your hand, which is really good because, like, you know, for, you know, if you want to keep hitting these, you know, whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, this is what you want. You want Glitterfangs. So and it's a repeatable source of it, so you can just like cast 1 red mana, get all your triggers, which admittedly in this deck are not too many. But yeah, there's enough to matter, like Elder Pine of Jukai and stuff, and then okay, fine, I don't need to attack with it. You know, because it won't survive most combat. It's only a 1-1. Goes back to your hand and be like, oh, do it again next turn, and just keep getting these triggers and stuff. So yeah, I think Glitterfang's really, really pretty good. I really, really wish there'd been at least 1 more in this deck. Then we have 2 Ghostlit Nourishers, so 3 mana for a 2-1. 2-1 green tap, gives target creatures +2/+2 till end of turn, and it has Channel, where you can pay 4, discard it to give it +4/+4 till end of turn. This is okay, I think. It's, you know, kind of, those abilities are kind of expensive, like 4 mana for a +4/+4 boost is quite expensive. It's okay, yeah. kind of underwhelming, honestly. Ghostlit Raider I think is a little better. 3 mana for a 2-1. What's abilities are 2-1 red tap, does 2 damage to target creature. Channel it for 4 to do 4 damage to target creature. Yeah, in retrospect, that's actually much better than Ghostlit Nourisher, just because it serves as a kill spell, which is kind of what you want, really. Yeah, I like. Yeah, Ghostlit Raider I think is pretty good. And obviously, it's like being only 3 mana means it's like pretty much all your Soul Shift cards can get it back, which means you can like channel it again and kill another creature, or yeah, whatever. It's fine. Shining of Life's Roar. So there were, as I always feel like I say this a lot, but there were a cycle of these cards, 1 in each color, and they all had an ability, and you could channel them for you know, not much mana, and they would basically pass on that effect to one of your creatures. So the white one I think gave probably like First Strike or something. The blue one I think gave Flying. The red one I think probably gave Haste. The black one was weird in that it couldn't block, so you channeled it to make an enemy creature not block. Shining of Life's Roar is by far the best one, because all the other Shinings are really overcosted if you play them as creatures. Their value comes from being able to channel them very cheap. Shining of Life's Roar is not only cheap to cast at 2 mana, has a really good effect, has a lure effect, which is really, really good, and can also channel to do a lure effect. So by far, out of all the Shinen, this one is definitely the best, just because, you know, lure effects are so strong, because, you know, it just means, okay, all your creatures have to block my Glitter Fang, everything else gets through and does damage to you. And yeah, or it could be you play the Shine of Life's Roar on its own. You don't have to necessarily channel it. So yeah, super good card. I really like Shine of Life's Roar. So that's all the creatures. So non-creature spells. So 2 Crushing Pains, 2 mana, Arcane Instant, does 6 damage to a creature that's already been dealt damage this turn. That's okay. 6 damage is obviously pretty chunky, but you gotta, jump through a bit of a hoop to have it go off. But yeah, I think it's okay. Probably would happen more likely than you think, because obviously, you could have, a combat phase, and damage is still hanging around. So you could do this post combat to kill off a bigger creature, maybe. Devouring Rage. So 5 mana for an Arcane Instant. As an additional cost to play Devouring Rage, you can sacrifice any number of spirits. Target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. For every spirit sacrificed this way, that creature gets an additional +3/+0 until end of turn. So this is potentially this is like the game-ending swing you do. This is like the Hail Mary. Like, you attack with everything. Maybe you've done Shining of Life's Roar. Opponent's like blocking into one creature. You do Devouring Rage. You sacrifice everything and put the buff onto like one creature, and they do lethal that way. So yeah, Devouring Rage is okay, and also works well in this deck because you're sacrificing spirits, and most of them have Soul Shift, so they'll die and then get other spirits back. Sure. A single Glacial Ray. I think this is, and it makes me really sad, I think this is the first Kamigawa deck that has Glacial Ray in it. And this was like meant to be the red burn spell for like the block. This was the shock equivalent essentially, and yeah, it's taken this long for it to show up in a deck, which is insane. Like, and it really makes me, it just makes me very confused and angry at how like the Kamigawa decks as a whole were put together. But anyway, Glacial Ray, 2 mana, does 2 damage to target creature player, and you can splice it onto Arcane for 2 as well, which is perfectly fine. You've got plenty of Arcane spells here. So if you've got 2 mana floating around, you can do the spell and also tack on 2 damage as well. Really wish there'd been more than one of these as well, honestly, but it is what it is. 2 Inner Calm, Outer Strength, 3 mana, gives a creature +X on turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So unfortunately, like, the Wisdom mechanic in Saviours is creeping into here as well. Things like you're playing like a really kind of like, I mean, you got a fairly cheap load of creatures here, like, and you've got no card draw really, because this is kind of before red green really got card draw. So this is usually going to be pretty bad. Like, you're usually dumping your hand out as quickly as possible, do as much damage. So like for this effect, spending 3 mana, I'd say you want this to be giving at least, I would say at least +5/+5 to make 3 mana worthwhile. But when are you going to have 5 cards in hand in this deck? Like, you're going to be playing your creatures, you're going to be playing like your burn and buff spells. Yeah, so this is pretty bad. Like, honestly, it's just, I don't see it having really any advantages over like just a normal like giant growth, honestly. I would say even Kadama's Might is better. And Kadama's Might is a better card. 1 green mana for +2/+2, and it splices. So yeah, perfectly good card. Rending Vines is like another one of these like really bad wisdom cards. So it's 3 mana. Destroy an artifact or enchantment if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your hand. So again, you have to jump through these hoops of like making sure it actually destroys something, but you get to draw a card. So is that worth it? No, I don't think it is. I think it's just a bad card. Strength of Cedars. I think I've talked about Strength of Cedars before. I think it was in a previous deck looked at. But it gives +X on turn, where X is the number of lands you control. So, I mean, it being 5 mana, you're expecting like, oh, at least it will give +5/+5. You do have a few ways of ramping up mana early, but then why would you cast this earlier, I suppose? This is okay. Obviously, it gets better as the game goes on, and you get more land out. It's fine. And then 2 Unchecked Growth. This is actually probably the best buff spell in the deck. It's just 3 mana. It's just a set +4/+4, and it gives trample if you're targeting spirit, which you will, because obviously nearly all your creatures are spirits. So this is just the most straightforward buff spell, and I just think it's just better than Strength of Cedars. It's better than Inner Calm, Outer Strength. Just should have had more Unchecked Growths really. So it could have been. So overall, I think the deck's actually not. Yeah, it's pretty solid. It's just red green aggro. which you think would be hard to get wrong, but like I have seen some decks do it wrong, but this one I think does it just fine. There's like enough good cards in here that I think it's fine at what it does. But yeah, that doesn't mean there's not room for improvement. Burning Eye Zubera I think would have been quite fun in this. So it's 4 mana for a 3/3, and if it dies, if it took more than 4 damage, or 4 damage or more, it gets to do 3 damage to a creature, which I think is pretty fun. It's meant to be like one of the grown-up Zuberas from like Champions of Kamigawa, which is really weird because they were only in red and blue. There wasn't like a grown-up white, black, or green Zubera, which is weird to me. But anyway, Haruwana I think would have been all right as well. So it's 4 mana for a 2/1. When it comes into play, you draw a card, and whenever you play a Spirit Arcane spell, you can bounce it back to your hand, so you can play it again and draw a card. Haruwana is pretty good. Path of Anger's Flame, this just gives all you this is just Trumpet Blast, but it's arcane, so it just gives your whole board +2/+0/turn, and it's just a really simple effect, and that's just what the deck wants. We don't want to be mucking around with like, oh, how many cards you got in your hand? Oh, it's this many. No, just give me Path of Anger's Flame for just a straight. That's all I want, just +2/+0 to everything. Blind with Anger, I think, would have been fun as well, like this kind of Act of Treason effect, which is at instant speed, which is pretty strong. Pain Kami, you can sacrifice to do X damage to a creature. Solar Magma, when you play Spirit Arcane spell, does 1 damage to a creature, which is okay. Kind of overcosted at 5, honestly. And Unearthly Blizzard, this is kind of what the deck actually really wants. It's something that stops creatures blocking for a turn, so all your spirits can get through. So, yeah. But in terms of rares, I haven't suggested any other ones here, because I think Arashi and Jawari are perfectly good rares in this deck. I actually couldn't think of alternate rares to put in this deck. So in summary, I actually I was going to say I quite like this one. It is all right. It is I definitely like it more than the other two from Saviours I've looked at so far. I didn't have this deck, but I did build something sort of very similar to it, like just red green spirit aggro. I might have. I feel like I must have got this deck because I do have Arashi and Jawari in my collection. The only way I can think I'd have them is if I bought this deck. So, yeah. And yeah, I tweaked it a little bit, so just doubled up on some of the good cards. But overall, this is okay. It's red green aggro. It's doing the job perfectly well. It's not messing around with any like I say like basically bad mechanics. So yeah, I think it's perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable deck. Probably the best in Saviors. Which is, I mean, that's how sad is that? That like just a kind of like a kind of mediocre red green aggro deck is the best deck in a set. But anyway, that was my opinion of the deck after looking at it, but I'd like to know what your opinions were after seeing the deck and its contents. Did you have this deck and did you play it? Did you make any changes? What was your experience with it? As usual, put a comment below if you've got any kind of stories or opinions with this deck, but I'll be back next time to look at the last deck from Saviours of Kamigawa. Until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a great day.